Hey everybody, it's Conscious Medium Brandon Russ. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful day wherever you are. Over 10,000 people subscribed and viewed. And thank you for being along in the journey. I felt your heart taps. I read your encouragement. Thank you so much for coaching me energetically back to health. Thank you so much, guys. Today is going to be a really kind of interesting day. You've learned that my videos are about fun stuff, sort of, celebrities, conflicts, even the state of the world. Well, today I'm coming to you with the energy of Roe versus Wade. In the United States, Roe v. Wade is something that's actually taught in school, but the way that it's taught is, you learn it as a concept of women's rights. You learn it as an idea of reproductive rights. And you also begin to kind of understand how the judicial system rather, actually can play a hand in everyday life. I want to talk about the energy of what, how, and when it happened. I'm actually going to take apart the chart of Norma, who is actually Jane Roe. It's a very interesting story how it even became Roe. And then we're going to take a look at the landmark decision that happened on January 22nd, 1973. By the way, a full solid month and a half, 6 weeks before I was born. That's how old this freaking thing is. And why is it that maybe energetically the SCOTUS, as it's called, the Supreme Court justices, feel the need to overturn it now? Well, it has something to do with Pluto returns here in the United States. And it's very easy to kind of look at different dates and say, well, this is happening on this date, this is happening, whatever. This is a long systemic challenge here in the United States. And before we get started, I want to actually lay out there my bias. And this is a really important thing to me as someone that is spiritual, for someone that does this work. And I want you to keep in mind that the person that's talking to you about this is someone that talks to dead people. I want that pause to sink in for a moment. So when we talk about this issue, know that I can feel the connective souls that have been lost, and I feel the journey of the person sitting in front of me. I also want you to understand that I can connect the dots between what is right and wrong within moments. I also want to come to you as the bias of a human. I'm a white male. I was born in the South. Some people find that intriguing all of a sudden. But have lived 99% of my life in upstate New York. I was born to a middle class family. We owned a business. It went south. Things got redirected, and my journey went through really kind of middle class America all the way through. I've never gotten much higher than middle class. I've never necessarily gotten to be ever the silver spoon, but I understand the differences between going to an interview and being the blue-eyed white guy and going to the interview and having the deck stacked against you. I've experienced both of those things in my life for two completely different reasons. I also want to say that as a male, yes, I have outdoor plumbing. I checked this morning. There is a popular opinion that men should not have an opinion about Roe versus Wade. What I'm about to explain to you is not only do men have a stake in this, it is actually one of the ways that you're being divided. To solely call this a women's issue automatically takes it off the plate of men. Men need to have an equal response to this, not because of the woman they care for, or because they somehow feel justified that women need to be stood up for, or some other chauvinistic bullshit social society thing that we have ingrained in us, but rather to help us understand that society as a whole is affected, particularly here in the United States. But careful, everybody, we are a pace setter when it comes to the world at times, that we have this dynamic that we're being divided by saying the men versus women. We see this consistently in social constructs regularly, where everything from the AIDS epidemic, everything's a pandemic these days, but the AIDS crisis was it's just a gay thing. Well, it automatically divided because it no longer made it an issue about the human existence, but it rather made it an issue about a lifestyle choice, or therefore otherwise some sort of flaw that you could easily detach yourself from. We have to evolve and start to look at this as a human experience. Stop. It is not about our plumbing. although our plumbing is affected, and I do realize that why women would feel that this is targeting your uterus, that is your technical ground zero. But when you begin to pull back the layers of everything that comes into how Roe versus Wade was decided, it actually is based upon the 14th Amendment, which is about privacy. While everybody was out there waving their vaccination cards, pushing vaccination, I'm vaccinated. You remember all that horse hockey we were doing to one another? We were slowly eroding our own right to privacy. And now the judicious arm of the government realizes this would be a good time to take another shot at taking away the rest of your privacies. Know that you had a hand in the energy of this. And you may say indignantly, well, it's a health issue and blah, blah, blah. Show me the science where any of this needed to be public, whether or not you received a vaccination. You are still required to wear a mask. You are still required to go through things. I'm not scolding or chastising you, but I just want you to recognize that the trend tended to be, I don't really care about my rights anymore. I'll show everything you damn well please. I'm just telling you, the stage was set energetically for this to happen. Second, within my bias is the personal journey that I have. I am a near 50-year-old man that doesn't have children of his own. It's difficult every single time that I hear that someone chose to terminate. I don't say that in a judgmental way, and I will tell you that some 20 years ago, I was pretty judgmental about it. Why would you do that? Don't you know what a gift it is? All of the guilt trips that might have come along with it. But as a medium, I began to realize and understand that the path and the purpose for that person to make the decision was theirs. Energetically, karmically, none of it mattered to me except for what was in front of me. I have had people personally come to me with the choice that they needed to make. In the moment, before I developed this side of me, I truly said to them, this is your choice because you have to work with us afterwards. You have to be that person that went through this. I was not connected to them romantically, nor was I on the other side of the equation of the choice, aside from being a friend and someone that would listen. But my advice stands true. The idea of having free will is the most important thing. As a medium, I have had women come to me saying, I need to make a choice and my deadline is this day. What should I do? Tell me what my future is of my child. Tell me what damnation I face. And I calmly explain to them that the social ramifications of this, of their choice, means everything to who they are. It is everything to the idea that no matter which way they choose, their path is clear. Perhaps this is in their way as a lesson. Perhaps it is in their way as a blessing. They need to determine it. And I hope you understand early on with the verbiage that I'm using. I hold the most sacred of all things in any of this, free will. The reason why I'm putting my bias right out front is because I don't want the slant of where I'm coming from. I want you to know where I'm coming from. Personally, it's a choice I wouldn't want to make. If a partner came to me and said, hey, got a baby here, I'm going to say, I always wanted a baby. Let's go have a baby. Yeah, but this, and this. I don't care. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Here comes karma. But the idea that this free will may be taken away from you, in my book, energetically, is nothing short of witchcraft, of acting like a Sith Lord, of acting like a demonic trait in which you can no longer be trusted with decisions. There is nothing more sacred in your text, in your journey, than your choices. Now, over time and maturity has given me the option to not be judgmental of a person, Now listen, if a person uses this as a form of birth control, that's a problem. That's a mental health issue. But if a person is in that position where they can cognitively work through what they have done and where they want to go with this, who are we to ever decide, both as other Americans and, God forbid, actually a judicious system, who, by the way, really needs to get back to why they were formed to begin with, and that is to create balance. You have scales as your symbol. By the way, this comes up in the charts. But as scales of the symbol, it's not meant to be, we are going to tell you what to do. We are going to judge you. We are going to rule for you or against you. And the opinion of it is horrible. Our opinion of you is judgmental. The judgment card in tarot isn't about judging you. It's about discernment. Our judicial branch needs to become discerning, not judgmental. And as you watch some of the flow of how it came to be, it's pretty remarkable. I'll add in from time to time where my biases are, and I have no problem showing that. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Share this with a friend that wants to go on a journey to understand this in terms of the energy. And I thank you guys for your support and where we're going with it. Now, you have to understand Roe versus Wade and understand how it came to be. Norma McCovey wanted to have an abortion. She had been pregnant with her then boyfriend, and there were circumstances around it that were actually kept confidential. I want to note something. The male that was attached to this has more confidentiality to Norma, who we should have never known her name because she was Jane Roe. By the way, something very interesting, that in most cases, Jane Doe, with a D, is presented so that then there is very specific privacy in place. Roe is occasionally used when they want to show that it has something to do with the person's medical health. The term Roe actually means harvested fish eggs. I want you to first recognize that even in the nomenclature of this comes into reproductivity. Even when we call it the roe, it is about harvesting. There's something to this. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist because I've seen enough of it where it's just in plain sight and let's just start believing them. There's a difference between conspiracy, I'm trying to hide it, and believing your nonsense because you wear it on your sleeve. Both are important. But the term roe is a very specific term for harvesting female fish eggs. Pay attention. Now, Norma wanted to have an abortion, and she brought it to a Texas court because what she wanted was a safe and legal abortion. Now, this is in 1971. The landmark case came down in 1973. That's a very important timeline, wouldn't you think? Because baby Roe was actually born before the decision was rendered and there was no abortion in play. That is incredibly important to recognize. Now, switching over to the legal side of it, it was presided by the opinion of Judge Blackmun, who was actually a Minnesota Republican judge. He had actually served as lead counsel for the American Medical Association and spent copious amounts of times at the Mayo Clinic, the cutting edge of research at the time for medical ingenuity, procedures, so forth and so on. The doctors of the United States had Justice Blackmun's ear. They were in his ear in a very consistent manner. They were able to really make the argument that for reasons of liability, they wanted abortion legal. There's a reason why I'm saying this right now. There is a direct compromise as to why Judge Blackmun literally ruled in favor of this. He was a Republican. Furthermore, As he rendered his decisions, there were two judges in opposition. Both of those judges actually thought that his political expediency to this should be noted and recognized, and they wrote their opinions in such a way that everything could be challenged. Now, the actual principle, and I am in no way, shape, or form a legal scholar, a constitutional scholar, none of that. I'm a lay person, and here is some of my bias. I have read what I learned in school, and then I went to the internet and I pulled apart a lot of different facets. This is what I know. Roe versus Wade is actually connected to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is actually about your right to privacy, aka HIPAA. That is where HIPAA actually comes in as the timeline for why HIPAA is a thing, because you have a right to privacy. Are you following yet? By the way, if you really want to dive deeper, it actually is tied to the abolitionist movement and the 13th Amendment, and it was tied to the 14th Amendment because former slave owners still kind of felt like they had the right to go in and do what they wanted to the slaves. So the 14th Amendment actually strengthened their right for them not to go into the home or their quarters or whatever the case may be. That was the origins of this. I want you to understand that I just took you on a historical journey, which is why the three elements that I'm about to look at when it comes to the astrology of Roe versus Wade is going to be Norma. It is going to be the landmark decision date. And I've actually chosen to take the Pluto returns for the United States, which is July 4th, 2022. I wanted to take a look at where we're going with this, what the construct is. Now, at the time of this filming, we're at May 6th. We're right in between a couple of eclipses. This is a very important time for the weather to start to expose and start to draw out. We just came out of a partial eclipse of the sun, which tells us about going deep and a lot of shit behind the scenes. And then we have this illumination coming, where the truth is going to come out with this moon in Scorpio, with this lunar eclipse, full lunar eclipse. We've got to recognize that the weather in between is helping us get to where it is that we need to go. I'm taking the liberty here of looking at those three times, doing the comparison and taking a look at who we are and what we believe in. Fair enough? Gosh, thank you guys for coming along in the journey. By the way, I am going to put in the notes there that we can fast forward to whatever this timeline is. I realize I've gone a little bit long into the introduction, but I felt it was very important to talk about my biases, the small caption of understanding how we got here. This is a complex issue. There's a lot of complexities here. Let's go to the stars. First and foremost, I want to take a look at Norma here. And by the way, I'm doing this kind of funky anomaly thing. I didn't mean to do it like this, truth be told, but when I just went to press, I'm going to actually blank myself out and give this a little more credence here. I'm going to drop off and keep talking here. So taking a look at the chart here, this is Norma McCorvey's chart here. She is actually known as Jane Roe. And I'm going to blow it up here a little bit because I want you to be able to see it. So there's a lot of action in her natal chart. And again, in her natal chart, the natal chart, of course, is the day that you're born and where things are at. That is a thumbprint, if you will, when it comes to who you are and what you are about. The belief within astrology is that you have the ability and the power to have these strengths and weaknesses, these things given to you in the karmatic sense, that will help you along in your life path. This has to do with what you're handed down from the Akashic records, what your life lessons should be, so forth and so on. And when you analyze her chart, and again, I want to take each one of these, and then I'm going to do this kind of great cross comparison as to how all of these charts work together and how they influence one another. Well, first and foremost, and I'm going to go a little bit quick here, Norma is a Virgo, and she is at the witching hour of Virgo. If she was born just 8 hours later, she would have been into Libra. This is significant. Virgo is representative of the Virgin Mother. Her ascending is in Scorpio, which has its undertone in sexual desire and secrets. The moon is in Capricorn, which makes it emotionally detached, which, if you know her history, and I will talk about it here in a second, it's undeniable. we have to recognize that there is a component here that she is very much of how it is. Just pulling up one other chart here. So she's recognizing, again, you're not seeing what I'm doing behind the scenes. I just want to make sure I've got my notes in front of me. She has a couple of very different cool aspects here. She has Mercury in Libra and Venus in Libra. She also has her North Node in Taurus and her Lilith in Capricorn. Her 10th house is in Leo. I think these are incredibly important to note, and you see it really bunched up here, right? You see it kind of like as to one side. Well, a couple of the aspects that are really important here is that Uranus is in the 8th house. The 8th house represents sex and death and, all of that. So she has rebellion sitting in her 8th house in Uranus. Her rising is Jupiter with Scorpio. That is a really, really, really critical component here. Because what this is talking about is her exposing things, her pushing the envelope, right? Her Capricorn is actually a very self-preservation move because it's in her 2nd house, and the 10th house has, of course, is about her own persona, her role to the world, her career, if you will. The other interesting component to this is that her Mars is in Cancer. Well, Cancerian is about the family. Mars is about the conflict. She was meant in this life in a vacuum, not knowing that she is later to be known as Jane Roe. She is meant to be a catalyst, for conflict in the home, for a revolution on sexuality, and to be able to push the idea that this is going to be a legal matter. She had two very key components of that. She had the aspect of having Mercury in Libra and Venus in Libra. It yells self-love and self-preservation. I get why this is why it's perceived as a women's issue. She was the perfect mouthpiece for this. And then when you get into the idea that her 11th house has Neptune, Venus, Mercury, you saw it all conglomerated there. That is incredibly important. Incredibly important. And one aspect that comes out of this with her daughter, who, by the way, was born in 1971. She was never terminated. How do you think that conversation went 20 years later when she put 2 and 2 together and said, "Mom, are you Jane Doe?" Well, actually, it happened about 14 years ago on the Dennis Prager show, where Norma came to her daughter and said, "I need to have this conversation." It was like a Jerry Springer episode. And Norma basically said, "You should be grateful I didn't terminate you." And her daughter was like, "Are you friggin' kidding me? I'm supposed to thank you now?" She'd always had suspicions that that's who she was, but Norma never really had a good aspect to that. While her North Node is in Taurus, which is about resources, which is about money, which is about practicality and stability. Her challenge in this life was to be stable. By the way, her North Node sits at her 7th house, which is relationships. So stability within relationships. I'm sorry to say that Norma kind of fell on the sword with this. Later in life, she became a pro-life activist. And then on her deathbed, she talked about how well she was paid for it. She never really believed in the movement, everybody. And there's pieces of authenticity here in her chart that are never realized. As Mars in Cancer, on one side of it, this conflict with home is a pretty consistent conversation with her. And she emotionally was dead inside. Not all Capricorn moons are dead inside, but when you're put through the conflict that you have this trigger mark where you can just unplug and go away. That's a challenge for her. That's the aspect that I want to bring out here. One last aspect as I take a look at this. In division of how her chart is made up, there are 10 different aspects to it that you look at. She is 6 to the masculine, 4 to the feminine. She is also strong in the cardinal signs, which means that she is the one to forge ahead and be the first initiator. She's also heavy into the air signs, which means it's about thinking. So Norma was actually built for you, or she was built to take up space in the minds of people. That's a really important aspect that I want you to remember as we start to do the comparison chart. Hey everybody, it's Conscious Medium Brandon Russ, and meet me in Sedona. November 9th through the 13th, I'm going to be having a field trip retreat in Sedona. We're going to be in Angel Valley, and we'll be out there for the 11/11/22 portal. I can't wait for you to join me. Click on the link below for the free information session and get to know a little bit more about what the trip entails if you're interested. Thanks, guys. All right, everybody, moving on. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat and I still seem to have it. Oh my gosh, it's funny. Pay attention when spirit talks, right? When spirit interferes. All right, guys, so the next part of this topic is, of course, we want to talk about the landmark decision on January 22nd, 1973. And again, I kind of said this as a tidbit, just days before I was born. Just to let you know, for those of you that are aficionado and stalkers around here, we've got a beautiful thing connected to this. All right, so we're going to pull up the chart of what went on actually on that date. And I'm going to kind of do this, and then this, and then this. Here is the decision. Again, I'm kind of doing that funkiness. I'm going to step back and out of the way. Make sure we still have sound. Yes, 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 yes. All right, we're going to move this to the middle of the screen, and we're going to blow it up. First of all, I want you to notice kind of how sporadic these are. There are a couple of key squares that went on with Saturn, and then, of course, with Mars, with Pluto, which is very much a trigger here to this. But I'm going to make this a little bit wider so then you guys can see where we're going here. First of all, we've got a lot of action here in the 10th house. That's really pertinent, right? We've got a lot of Aquarian action. Not only is the Sun in Aquarius, but so is Neptune. We've also got the dynamic here, and I actually have to pull up my notes. I apologize for a second. The dynamic here that I want you guys to really pay attention to is that when you do a chart based on the astrology of an event, let's say, you have to really recognize the houses. And traditionally, the reason why you take a time that would be 12 noon, not unknown, that's different. We're choosing 12 o'clock, and for this reason, I want to again be transparent with the choice that I made here in this, is that on this event day, there were likely things that were exposed. There were probably likely things that were procedural. There were things that, like everything from like a clerk that needed to stamp it to somebody that did this, or a press conference and it was supposed to start at 2, but it really started at 4. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. The reason why you take the hallmark of that day is to do 3 things. 1, you want to be able to assign it the houses. 2, you want to be able to say that it was the process of the day, and you take the 12 noon in conjunct with, in this case, Washington, D.C., and again, I'm explaining the logic so that then if anybody wants to criticize the astrology of it, or hey, it's really truly this, that sort of thing, I just want to tell you what my logic was in order to do it. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe below about what your take was on it. I'd love to have discussions about this. If you're intelligent about it, I'm going to continue the conversation. If you're an asshat about it and you just want to tell me how wrong I am, congratulations, go get your own channel. So that's just kind of my point of view on that. All right, so I want to bring up the chart again. I'm going to blank my face out. And then I'm going to bring up, I'll just open up all of them, really. There we go. So in this chart, you've got a couple of really interesting aspects to it. Again, there's always interesting aspects, but astrologers look for 3 different things. We look for the patterns, we look for the emphasis, and then we look for the anomaly. So here is the pattern. The pattern, and really kind of comes into consistency when you look at one particular thing, is that here we are sitting in the 10th house. We've got the Sun, we've got we've got Neptune, we've got Uranus, we've got this incredible aspect. You got Mercury, you've got all of these aspects as to how the 10th house is freaking rocking. But I also want to point out, and again, if we believe that this is a women's issue, or at least a self-love issue, let's just move it away from the plumbing and move it towards the energy, the feminine energy of this, of the nurturing, of the birthing, right? Here's Venus sitting in the 8th house, everybody. Anybody else want to sit on that? That's a huge thing. And by the way, it creates a grand trine here. So you got Venus sitting over here, not too far away from Pluto. They're both sitting there in Sag. So you have Venus really being the anomaly to pull it across. What's the other anomaly? The other anomaly is the moon down here below in the 5th house. By the way, those astrologers that love to sit here and talk and criticize me, how many of you guys go right to their chart and go to their 5th and their 8th house and talk about their procreation and what they do and how they do it? The 5th and the 8th house combined is about the family you create. The 5th house is about creativity. The 8th house is about sex. How are you going to do it, with or without whipped cream? Am I right? Sorry, guys. I can't be all nondescript the whole time. Right? So that combination tends to lend itself to how you're going to want to create a family. If it's going to be by accident, if it's going to be by adoption, if it's going to be by design. In the 5th house is the moon. And by the way, just as a little bit of a rundown, I didn't do this at the top of the conversation. It is a Leo moon, a very determined, let's just get there moon, right? The ascending is Taurus. The sun is in Aquarius. So the personality here is it's going to get very kind of non-emotional, like it's on a mission. It's on an effing mission. You will not get in my way. The ascending in Taurus, of course, is about resources, is about the energy. Of course, we're dealing with a landmark case about resources, about energy. The moon is about a determination of love, a determination of purpose. And that is incredibly important to all of this, right? Now, I want to bring up the chart again because I know you geeks love it. I say that lovingly. But the other part of this that helps balance, and you always look for the balance, is what Jupiter is doing. Jupiter's in Aries. Now, Jupiter in Aries, it's a funny thing. We are in the time where Jupiter is going to be in Aries. Actually, Saturn's going to be in Aries. And there is just this upheaval. This just, ugh. You know, Jupiter being, actually Mars is going into Aries, but Jupiter in Aries is about this steadfast function of getting from point A to point B. Right? It is a determination. You've got a fire sign and you've got the fire god hooking up, right? Now, not like the little brother Mars, which is a little immature, but Jupiter's kind of the mature way of it. So this is going to be a bigger topic, right? You also have Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius. And again, its juncture here is pretty strong. And the north node of this is Leo. So the north node of the behavior of Roe versus Wade has not only a Leo moon, but also a Leo north node. That's incredibly important here. Incredibly important. Because we're dealing with Leo energy. We're dealing with nurturing energy. We're dealing with energy that when it's brought into the feminine divine is about determination. It's mama bear energy. It's protecting. So what side of the aisle are we protecting? Now, do you see why it's such a conflict? Are we being mama bear and protecting our young ones? Or are we being mama bear and protecting our rights of our loved ones? Well, which is it? Now, do you understand why this is so polarizing? And by the way, if you don't think that politicians don't look at the sun, moon, stars when they make decisions, or they look for things to implicate, just know that not only do they do it, Gene Dixon was on the White House payroll for nearly 20 years, everybody. We are not in a vacuum. We haven't been. This conversation needs to be front forward. I hope it's interesting enough. I know these videos get a little bit long, but the content's got to be good, right, guys? All right, so listen, we're going to go here as well. And by the way, still love to my friends at AstroSeek. They didn't have these tools in place, and I let them know that I couldn't use them for this video. So a lot of feedback. A lot of people brought that up, that they can't do comparison charts here. All right, so we want to take a look at, I don't want to quite go there yet. I don't think I want, yeah, I am going to go here. So I want to talk about, I'll just click on everything. I want to actually talk about now the landmark part of it moving forward into the Pluto returns. This is important, and it's important that everybody knows that I chose that date on purpose. I chose July 4th, 2022 at 5:10 p.m. at Philadelphia. Full circle. That is going to be the true Pluto returns. That is when it has gone its full 248 years, give or take. This one is pretty spot on, though. It's 248 years and like 4 days. Don't forget, we had it on a quarter a day here, dropped it here, blah, blah, blah. It's math. But the dynamic as to why we use that date, and there's a lot of emphasis on the U.S. Pluto returns. I'm going to have a full video on it. But for the sake of this argument here, I want to bring up the comparison. Well, before we move on, I actually want to do... there's actually one more thing I got to add in. I'm going to hold off on this. Actually, I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'm going to splice it together. All right, everybody. So we've been talking about here all the dynamics of, Dorothy, also known as Jane Roe, and her aspects of it. And now I want to start to kind of make the shift into taking a look at how that landmark decision plays out into the history of the United States. And the reason why we're going to be taking, again, July 4th, 2022, I know I'm recapping a little bit here, is because that is when the true return happens at 5:10 at Philadelphia. Again, feel free to kind of, critique or what have you. I want to look at this here alone. I'm going to quiet myself here in the back. This is the actual chart of the full Pluto returns for the United States. This is an incredibly important time for us. And in the future, I'm going to be doing a chart, I'm going to be doing chart analysis in terms of the key marks where we kind of went through in the U.S. history. I think that would be a really interesting thing to take a look at how we were born, even take a look at the conflicts, even take a look at 1865, which I think was a pivotal piece to it, where things were at, and then where we move over. So in concept, in construct, this is what it looks like. And I'll pause here for just a second and come back onto screen. I want to talk about why Pluto returns is such an important facet. So Pluto, I don't know, you pick up the name. Pluto is a planet in the far reaching of our solar system. It is the 9th planet, and occasionally it's the 8th planet. Don't tell Neptune that. Because of its elliptical state, it takes about 248 years to get from point A to point B. The reason why we call it 248 is because we're in a 248 cycle right now. What it means to be a Pluto returns is from the time that it starts at a certain point and the time that it goes all the way around in the 248 years, comes right back to set. So that's what it means by Pluto returns. Now, the true return probably is, well, not probably, it is on the July 4th. But a lot of astrologers talk about the return beginning in 2008 when we entered into Capricorn. In other words, we started with Pluto in Capricorn, we end in Pluto in Capricorn. This is our return time. I hope everybody kind of gets that as a concept and a construct here. So I'm going to bring up the Pluto alone again. And the key to this is when you look at the shape of it and you really look at the dynamic in which, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. This is a really key time. Remember what I said. We look for patterns, we look for anomalies, right? We look for consistencies. Well, the 5th and the 8th house are active again, everybody. Take a look at that. We've got Jupiter sitting here, right? Right next to the 5th house. You also have the dynamic. Wow, look at that. In the 5th house, there's our feminine energy. Then we have in our 8th house, the sun. Cancerian. So this is about what are we going to nurture? What are we going to believe in? Our 10th house is screaming because this is the moon. This is the emotional energy. And by the way, our country as a whole has a dynamic in which our moon moves through the astrological charts in a way, and that is part of the reason why we get such a fluctuation in emotion sometimes. Sometimes we want to care about things, sometimes we don't want to care about things, right? And then our Pluto here in Capricorn shows its true return. So it was at this exact mark in 1776. Sitting in the second house, which is about resources, everybody. So once again, remember when I said that the argument here is actually about resources? It's actually about our freedoms. It's not actually about female productive rights, although it plays out in the chart beautifully. You got Venus sitting in there in the 5th house, right? You've got the sun, Cancerian sun in the 8th house. So there's plenty of reproductive conversation, but it is not the absolute basis of it. And then you've got this physical energy part of Uranus here in the 6th house, taking care of our bodies, to our 10th house. There's your conflict, everybody. There's your conflict, because you have this Pluto square, and then you have your Uranus square. What a trine that becomes. I hope everybody sees this. So the 10th house is this MC. This is where the moon sits. You move backwards over here to the right, in between the 6th and 7th house. You've got Uranus sitting here in Taurus again. Here's the 2nd house love going on. Taurus is about resources. It's about stability. Here's Uranus. The rebellion is here. And then you have Pluto sitting in Capricorn in the 2nd house of resources. If I'm going to read this as is, I'm going to say that this is a time about our personal power. That's what this really is. Our time to come back. Just looking at the U.S. Pluto returns, it's about personal power, personal resources. And by the way, I can guarantee I'm going to go down this path. It's about constructing your American dream. It's about recognizing that, like, what do you have, what don't you have? And it's also really debilitating because you have this wide open piece to it. I'm going to bring it back up, and I really want to point this one out. So up at the top of the chart, you have you have this, the moon in the 10th house. Then in the 11th and 12th, you got nothing. Pardon me. You've got Scorpio and Libra with nothing. Oh, and by the way, thank you for the natural conflict, Libra and Justice, in Scorpio with sex and death. They're right next to each other for a reason on the chart. There's a natural conflict there. There's something unharmonious, right? So I'm going to draw this back here, but notice that wide open space, particularly in the 11th house, means that this isn't about your neighbor. This is about you. This isn't about your interaction with people. Even when you pull up the 7th house, right? 7th house has the sun, the 7th house is sitting here. I mean, come on, guys. This is Venus love. So this is your relationship with yourself sitting right there in the middle of it. That's the only relationship you need for this. This is going to be the U.S. returns in Pluto. The Pluto return for the U.S. is a very personal piece to the chart. It's a very personal aspect because the influence of the day is about personal preference and personal choice. I hope everybody gets that. Because what I want to take a look at now is actually the decision plus Pluto together, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to do this. It's not letting me move stuff here. I'm going to bring this up here. I want to bring it wide. I'm going to stay in the background here for a second. And I want to kind of look at a few of the different anomalies here that are really important to this. So what you're looking at here, okay, is that the outside, and I'm pretty sure of this, just want to make sure I've got the outside and the inside here. The inside is actually the decision date. So any of the planets that you see close to the vortex here, this is actually decisions. So you got Leo moon, you've got Aquarius sun, right? And you've got Pluto over here in Sagittarius. That plays a little bit into this. But you also have the structure here where Saturn was in the 6th house, guys. Saturn's about structure. Saturn's about Yes, you may. No, you may not. Mother, may I? Anybody else ever play that in the backyard down a hill at your grandmother's house? I know I did. So when we take a look at these aspects and we start to compare them, there's a really important thing that comes out of it. So where the anomalies are, okay, right out of the gate, you notice that the sun is square to Mars. So you find Mars on the outside, and you see it down here in Gemini, and you see it square here in Aquarius. So on that day, in the second house, is Venus. Looking at the wrong thing. There you go. This makes better sense. So in Mars, it's in the fourth house. This is the structure, your family, all that other good stuff. So that dynamic right there is a really important piece to this, because when it squares like that, what we're truly doing is we're looking at the dynamic of how the influence of the sun could have on anger. It's actually a very kind of tumultuous time. It's a very kind of, the aspect of this is really kind of about, Mars being warlike. There it is, right? Now, it's funny because when the sun squares with Venus, there's a different feel to it. It's more about its resources. It's more about our love. I mean, again, it's the Taurus feel. But when it's Mars, holy Toledo, the sun square with Mars is a really intense aspect, right? It's about being in competition, resolute, assertiveness. By the way, I know I don't like to mix these too much, but if you want to apply this to Ukraine, this is going to be a really intense time for that war, if it's still going the way that it should be going. Or it shouldn't be going, really. Should have been done weeks ago, guys. But shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? We have free will, which I honor, which, see the top of this story here. But this is kind of like going through setbacks, but ultimately winning, right? So that aspect alone, with Mars here hanging out at about 9:30 over here on the outside, and the sun in here at about, midnight 30, 12:30 on the inside, that is a square. That is a square. That gives us hope that the actual conflict will actually come through, that Roe v. Wade will be upheld. I'm just telling you, I'm reading this. The skin in the game in this for me is about free will. This is the aspect that the battle of free will has a leg up on this. I want to go back to it. I'm going to spend a little more time on this, guys, than the Roe v. Wade thing. Is I think it's important. I think this is really important to the analysis of the country and the world, quite frankly. Sometimes I get lost in my own notes here. So another dynamic that I think that you have to really kind of project yourself to and understand clearly is that this is also in Cancer. Like the return is in Cancer, right? So the Pluto return in Philadelphia has, the Scorpio rising, the Virgo moon, which, by the way, removes the tension of emotion. Mercury in Gemini, Venus in Gemini, Mars in Aries. This is a very tumultuous time, not only in our history, but also in who we are as a people. Our country is getting to a point where it's put up or shut up time. This Roe v. Wade thing is on a collision course for it. 100%, guys. All right, I want to bring this back up because I know you guys are studying it hard on it. And it's funny. I've got so many notes open. Here we go. Now, in this landmark decision, and again, I don't know that they're necessarily going to have it all squared away beforehand. But I will tell you that when, the indicator of the dates and the beliefs within, I don't mind that I'm doing a little bit of work. I think you guys know I'm pulling up my research stuff here. But as you design these charts and you look at these charts, everybody loves absolutes. And remember what I said about Sith Lords and absolutes. People love absolutes, right? They want you to be spot on. They want you to be, 100%. They want you to be, the Johnny on the spot. And it's like, oh, well, you're off. Well, sure, anybody could have said that, or, whatever the case may be. I want you guys to really look at this from the perspective of someone that pulls this stuff apart, and it's, you get to a certain point where it's no longer a coincidence. Like I said earlier, like the conspiracy theorists like almost annoy me now. I mean, I appreciate them. I appreciate that they're the thinkers, the what-ifers, right? But what I'm really concerned with is the real, right? So there is also the real proponent for revolution here. And when you do the comparison of a landmark decision like this, and it's a spot in time, right? So you look at it as the spot in time that it is. As you look at the spot in time, you begin to recognize that it is on a collision course for this. And you also realize that the purpose of say marks on the calendar or weather in the sky comes together is for a very particular purpose. So for purposes of our argument, I'm looking at the landmark decision meeting the date. Instead of it being synastry and being able to live and grow and whatever, I am doing this comparison like this, which is why the square into Mars is so important. The sun is also conjunct with Pluto. I'm going to bring up the chart. I'm just going to do a run through of what I see in the chart and let you guys kind of, weigh in as you go along. By the way, like, subscribe, go ahead and talk about it below. I love your comments on this. I learned from all of them. You have the sun in conjunct with Pluto. Now, what does that mean aside from the idea that you are getting empowered by this? There is something here that is not only karmic in nature, but also it's a dynamic where it was meant to happen. So instead of looking at it that we're just kind of here, what it is that there's an attraction. It's almost like the two are made for one another. It's almost as if this conflict of choice rights is 100% destined for a United States of America formation destination. So the formation of the United States is contingent on what this decision has brought to it. Who the hell are we? That's really what it's asking, right? Oh my gosh, I love this stuff. Now I'm getting going. All my notes are in front of me. So as we go along in this and we talk about this, know that there's a destiny here. Well, the sun in conjunction to this is we're karmic partners in this. The moon is also in opposition to Saturn, which is an upheaval of things. We're questioning our law. That is a very important aspect. But the moon is also square to the north node. Well, that tells me that our love, our passions, our emotions are going to be challenged with who are we? What are our destiny? Is the destiny of the United States to be a compassionate country, to tell people what to do, or to allow free will? That is the argument on the table. Venus is in opposition of Mercury. In other words, the Venus of the decision to the Mercury of the return is such that it's like, we're done talking about it. Leave us alone. Venus is trying to Mars, which tells me, and it's a 4, it tells me that the very complex nature of what's going on here has everything to do with the idea that ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to figure out who the hell we are, guys. You guys do know this, right? Like all of these challenges that are coming up, I know you guys can hardly see this, but it's there for representation at this point. you do realize that these challenges are directly affecting who we are and what we're about. As a country, as a person within the country, right? We've seen the United States government, for better or for worse, completely bungle so many things in the source of self-preservation. Instead of criticizing politicians for having their own skin in the game, why don't you start to look at it and say, you guys were teaching us how to behave. You guys were setting the example that I really need to be in it for me. That's actually what the Pluto Return shows to me on the quick perusal. What's in it for me? The American dream. I'm going to go back to my notes here. By the way, Jupiter's conjunct with Mars, which is a hellfest. Get ready for a giant war with this one. And by the way, Jupiter being the larger planet over the junior planet of Mars, guess what? Jupiter is going to turn around to Mars and say, you're my bitch, baby. You may bring all that Aries stuff in, but here I am as Jupiter. I'm going to rule over everything. I'm going to expand this argument. That's really what this is saying. Expansion, conflict. Expand the conflict. God, I hope there's peace in Ukraine before this hits. Mars is also in opposition to the 10th house. This is going to be a black eye, excuse the pun. I don't even know if that's a pun. I just think it's a bad example. This is going to be a bad mark on the United States in its history. I'm sorry. But this Mars opposition, it's also square, the landmark decision square to Venus. There's a lot of fight in this chart, guys. There's a shit ton of fight in this chart. Saturn sextile to Lilith. You know what that tells me? That is the rebellion within. Lilith is one of the other rebellions. By the way, Uranus is square to Uranus. So the Uranus position of the birth of Roe v. Wade and the Uranus of the Pluto returns of the United States is square. Uranus square is a really rare, super rare. Because, you know, it happens every 22 years. That's actually what I was looking up. I wanted to look at the cycle. I wanted to look at the rarity of it. It's a rarity for sure. And when it squares Uranus, this is about the rebellion within yourself. Guys, as I'm doing this, there's a certain amount of this that I'm learning as I go. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know it's these aspects. This is what I don't overplan these on purpose. I work with a gift called Stream of Consciousness. I let it kind of unfold in front of me, and it sounds like I've been struggling a little bit for about 6-7 minutes. I'm not struggling anymore because I see it. We're currently in a position here in the United States to really be concerned. This topic alone, this topic and this topic alone is worthy enough to create enough upheaval in our life, in our structure. Forget about January 6th, everybody. This topic may be the absolute marching reason on July 4th. Start to look for it now. Start to look for the idea of freedom. There's going to be a giant pro-life and a giant pro-choice march on July 4th. It's in the chart. The two sides are absolutely going to war with this. We're talking about religious zealots. We're talking about people that believe in free will. Pluto is also square to the 10th house, which is we're going to make the United States famous for this. Mars is in opposition with the 10th house. In other words, we're fighting their identity of who they are. So the choice and the landmark decision is going to become the battleground in the 10th house, which is the United States career, its persona, on what it's known for. And by the way, one more thing, that if I was the United States in this argument, is that the rising sign of this conflict, right? The rising sign of the Roe v. Wade argument of course it is. I know I said it earlier. I'm just double checking before I talk about it, because I somehow clicked off of it. This, guys, yeah, here it is. The rising in this is Taurus. January 22nd, the rising sign at the time of the rising, and again, the reason why we picked 12 noon, I had to justify that, is Taurus. It's about resources. It's about who we are. It's not about money. I mean, money is an underlying resource. It's an energy. This is about the energy of the people, the will of the people, the energy of what's going on. I mean, hot damn. I love that I saw this. I also hate that I saw this. So your Uranus and Uranus, your rebellion is meaning this is upheaval. Pluto square into the 10th house, the power of the people versus the persona of the person, right? Then you also have the 10th house. The Taurus is going to show up trying to the 10th house. This is us. There's chance for peace in this. This is where I'll back this a little bit. A lot of conflict. And I'm showing it through passion. The fact that the rising is in trine to the 10th house means that it could be just political debate. That's little clear on that one. But the 10th house of the conflict into the 10th house, into the Pluto, is a conjunct. It's right together, everybody. The image of this whole movement, the image of Roe versus Wade, is going to empower the presence and the persona of what we think we are, good or bad. Wow. And you know, guys, I talk to dead people for a living. And when I look at astrology, I use it and utilize it in a way where not only do I say, oh, this is why this happened, the conditions were right. When I look at things predictively like this, I think, what's the worst case scenario? And in the scheme of things, what I really want people to kind of recognize and understand is that we have free will. Understand that we're getting to a fevered pitch of argument. And you realize that we're getting to a point where we can begin to criticize ourselves and be criticized because we take a stand the way that we do. We often take stands because in the moment we're provoked. We're provoked to say, I'm going to take away your rights. And then we minimize it to invoke that power to something closer to you and say, we're going to take away your women's rights. All of a sudden you're bonded and yet divided. I stand behind the peacemakers. I stand behind the people that want to be free so that then they can live the best life they can. And ultimately, from Akashic to signing up for your life's work, to doing the life's work, to exiting the way that you're meant to, that's really what I'm all about. I think that free will is a very key tool for our path and our mission as humans on this earth. We're given the conflict of the family we're born into and the blessing of the family you're born into, which might be riddled with conflict. We're given the benefit or the challenge of the socioeconomic conditions in which you're born into, the place in which you live, the belief system that you follow, the opportunities that you have. You're also given the opportunity to grow, to form your own opinion and be able to make the world what you want it to be. To take away free will is to take away a part that is very important to everyone's path. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, what is truly the most important thing is whether or not you're given the opportunity to make a choice or a mistake The beauty of all of this, and there is beauty, is that you don't always value things until you have to fight for them. I'm willing to fight for the idea that free will is important. This isn't witchcraft. We're not going to cast spells and take away free will. That's bullshit. Send them to me. What I am going to tell you is that the effort of people that want to remain in a free lane and begin to respect people for the choices that they make. In all of my career, in all of my life, in all of my decision making, one of the things that I found most peaceful was that when someone else made a decision for themselves, it had little to no bearing on me. Please tell that to the religious zealots. Please tell that to the people that got greased to say that their opinion mattered, or that their opinion could turn into law. We are at this time where Pluto is in Capricorn and things are getting ripped off left and right. The idea that you think that we're going to get out of this unscathed is a fallacy. The idea that we can grow from this is 100% accurate. Take this chart and the words that I've said here today and assimilate them. Don't take them as gospel. Don't take them as absolutes. Take them as one person's opinion that you needed to hear today and assimilate it into what you know, how you've grown, your experiences, your circumstances. You reserve the right to change. You reserve the right to gain more information and grow. Anyone that takes that away is working against you as an energetic being. Notice how I'm not saying anything about religion or faith or creator. The human experience is where it's at because that's what we're in right now. We fill ourselves full of bullshit and karmatic joy and, oh my gosh, the moment is joy and all this other stuff. And it's blissful. But then when you turn to reality and you start to realize where the battlegrounds are for your path, it's time to gird up. It's time to look at this and say, this is where we're going. And by the way, I'm encouraging both sides here. Where do you stand? I'm going to tell you the way that I think this is going to go, and I think it's all going to get struck down because it's going to get revealed how it came to be. Part of the reason why cryptocurrency is so popular is because the US dollar doesn't exist anymore. They just haven't told you yet. This Capricorn return in Pluto is so incredibly important that when we get there, when we cross that finish line, wherever that finish line is, we're going to recognize that the things that we thought we stood for, we don't. But we are going to have to personally make up our minds what we believe in. We're not going to have politicians to protect us and hold our hands. They've already given us hints of that during a pandemic. We're not going to have financial institutions to back us up because they're too busy getting poised into positions where they're too big to fail and getting bailed out all the time. Consistently follow the charts. Last but not least, we have to start taking personal accountability for not only what we believe in, but also how we go about and do our business. Part of personal accountability is doing the education, the self-education of self, and recognizing that you need to consistently, what was that? Apparently my angels are here. To be able to consistently grow and gain more information, like I said, and form your opinion. You have to take responsibility for your opinion, not just spew it. We need to start doing this. It's the age of Aquarius. We are in prep mode, but not end of the world prep mode. Don't go get your food and rations bullshit. No, this is in prep mode. What is our behavior and consistent with where we want to go? It starts with personal accountability. It starts with being able to understand your values, your truth, your authenticity. I've been through the ringer in the last couple of years, and God damn it, that's been my lesson. Who are you? What's your authenticity? As we move into this, we want to find people that are also authentic. Codependency is not where it's at anymore, anyone. It's truth. That's why the basic structure of the United States government has to change intrinsically. It is not about the beneficial thing of what can you do for me. And I'm not just talking about, substance checks. I'm just not talking about tax returns. I'm just not talking about the United States Army that gets sent all over the world for wars that actually don't do what our core value is, and that is defend us. Who are we? This is our time to figure this out, and we are barreling towards it. Watch for the Roe versus Wade to be the front line of a lot of shenanigans, a lot of arguments, and a lot of deception. Who are we? It's time to decide. I'm going to see you guys next time. Thanks for hearing me on this. Sorry I struggled a little bit in the middle, but I had to stay in the moment. I want to thank you guys for being a part of this. Give yourself a hard tap. I hope you guys join me in Sedona. I dropped that commercial in there in the middle of it. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to be doing a lot of awakening. We're going to be doing a lot of cleansing. And I'll see you soon. Thank you, guys. Keep going.